The night they told me to leave, the air in Charleston felt thick enough to choke on. Cicadas screamed outside, louder than my heartbeat, as I stood in the living room of the house I'd grown up in. My father's face was red, the vein near his temple pulsing. "No more handouts, Emma," he barked, slamming a stack of bills onto the coffee table. "You're 29. Time to stop pretending that app of yours is anything but a hobby." My brother Brian leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a smirk stretching across his clean-shaven face. "Guess you'll finally see what the real world's like," he said, like he'd been waiting his whole life to deliver that line. Mom sat stiffly on the couch, her manicured hands folded so tight her knuckles whitened. She didn't meet my eyes. "We can't keep enabling this," she murmured. "You should come work at the store. Learn some stability." The words hit harder than I expected, even after years of insults dressed as advice. "You think stability still exists in a store that hasn't changed since 1987? I asked quietly. "Thread Trail is working. I'm building something that—" Dad cut me off with a short laugh. "Working? You live in my guest room and drive a car older than you. Stop embarrassing yourself." The silence that followed felt final. My throat ached, but no tears came. I just nodded once, turned toward the hallway, and said, "Fine." Brian chuckled under his breath. Mom whispered my name, but didn't move. I grabbed my laptop bag and keys, stepped out into the humid night, and let the screen door slam behind me. They thought they'd kicked out a failure. What they didn't know was that I'd just signed a $2.8 million seed funding deal with a venture group in Austin that very morning. The money wasn't what mattered. It was proof that the dream they'd mocked for years had become real. Driving away in my dented Corolla, headlights slicing through the Spanish moss shadows, I told myself I wouldn't look back. But I did. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Mom standing at the window, her arms wrapped around herself. For a second, I almost turned around. Then I remembered the smirk on Brian's face and pressed harder on the gas. That night changed everything. If your family ever called your dream a joke, share your story in the comments below. Because every like, every comment helps voices like ours be heard. And if you've ever had someone throw you out just for believing in yourself, stick around. This story might sound familiar. The first week on my own was quiet. Too quiet. The apartment I found downtown was tiny, one room, peeling paint, a window that rattled when trucks passed, but it was mine. I slept on an air mattress beside my laptop, coding through the nights, determined to make Thread Trail more than just revenge fuel. I kept waiting for a call from Mom. It never came. Sometimes, when the city was still and the only sound was my keyboard, I'd think about the way Dad's voice had cracked when he said, "Get out." Maybe it wasn't anger. Maybe it was fear. Fear that the world he knew was fading. Fear that his daughter had already stepped into the new one without him. Still, his fear became my freedom. By the time the sun rose that first morning, I made myself a promise. They'd regret the way they said goodbye. 7 years earlier, I was 22 and too hopeful to recognize a storm when I was standing in one. It was the same house, the same living room, only the walls still smelled like my mother's cinnamon candles, and my father's laughter still belonged to easier days. That night, I'd come home from college with trembling hands and a dream I could barely explain. I told them I was dropping out of Clemson to work full-time on an app idea I'd started with my classmate, Marcus Hayes. It would help small clothing stores personalize outfit recommendations for customers using AI and data from social media trends. Marcus and I believed we could give local boutiques a way to fight back against big box retail. Dad lowered his newspaper slowly, staring at me as if I'd just confessed to a crime. "You're leaving a top university to play with computers and fashion?" he said. His tone wasn't confusion, it was contempt wrapped in disbelief. Mom's eyes filled with worry. "Honey, what about your degree? Your brother's already building a career. You can't just walk away." And Brian, sitting on the stairs with a soda can dangling from his fingers, laughed. "Give her 6 months. She'll be back when it flops." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled. Small, polite, scared. "You'll see. One day you'll understand." They didn't. The first few years were brutal. Marcus and I turned his aunt's garage into our headquarters. 2 secondhand laptops, a folding table, a fan that clicked every 30 seconds. We lived on instant noodles and determination. The app crashed constantly. The investors ignored our emails, and the nights stretched longer than the days. But we kept going. Every time I came home for holidays, the house felt colder. Dad would say, "You still playing around with that phone thing?" Mom would sigh and change the subject. Ryan would pat me on the shoulder like I was a child pretending to be an adult. I'd help around the store, stock shelves, process returns, balance the register. Anything to remind them I cared. When I mentioned that we could move sales online, Dad just shook his head. Our customers want to touch what they buy. Don't overthink it. I remember standing behind the counter one Saturday, watching an elderly couple walk out without buying a thing because they'd already found the same jacket cheaper online. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words died before they formed. That night, I sat in my childhood room, lit only by the glow of my laptop. I stared at our app's dashboard. 10 downloads, 2 active users. Marcus texted me, "Don't quit, we're close." And I whispered to the empty room, "I wish I could make them see." But the truth was, I wasn't chasing money or fame. I just wanted them to look at me with pride again. Years later, when Thread Trail finally started gaining traction, I kept it quiet. Every feature we built, every partnership we landed, it all stayed between me and Marcus. I didn't want their approval anymore. I just wanted peace. Still, every time I saw Dad's tired hands folding shirts under the buzzing fluorescent lights, or Mom writing another check to cover store rent, I wondered what would have happened if they'd just trusted me. It's strange how love and disappointment can live in the same heart. I wasn't angry then. I was still that girl in the garage, coding in the dark, believing that if I worked hard enough, they'd finally see the light. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It arrived quietly, dressed in politeness and family small talk. 2 weeks after they kicked me out, I was settling into my new life downtown, a cramped apartment above a bakery that smelled like sugar and burnt bread. I worked 16-hour days, coding, pitching, meeting investors through Zoom calls. Sleep was optional. Progress wasn't. Then, one morning, my phone buzzed. Natalie, a barista I'd met during college, sent me a message. "Hey, not sure if you've seen this, but your mom's posting stuff on Facebook. Says your business collapsed. Says you're staying on friends' couches." I froze. The air left my lungs. Scrolling through the screenshots she sent, I saw my mother's words, written with the same care she once used on birthday cards. Sometimes tough love is the only way to save a lost child. We had to let Emma fall so she could learn. The comments were full of sympathy emojis and prayers. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. I wanted to think it was a misunderstanding, some warped attempt to protect me. But then Natalie sent another message. Also, Brian posted a pic of a new car, a Mustang. Said, "Family pulls through when you hustle right." Thought you should know. Something twisted in my chest. I logged into my old joint savings account, the one I'd opened in college with Mom's name still attached, a backup for emergencies. My breath caught when I saw it. 2 withdrawals, $6,000 each, made 3 days apart. The account showed her signature. For a long time, I just sat there, listening to the hum of the fridge, trying to make sense of it. She hadn't just told the world I'd failed, she'd stolen from me to keep up her lie. And Brian, with his perfect grin and perfect timing, was driving around Charleston in my money. It wasn't the cash. I could make more. It was the principle. The quiet cruelty of rewriting my story while I was too tired to fight back. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up fixing Dad's bookkeeping errors, helping Mom with online orders, covering Brian's student loan interest when he forgot. None of that mattered now. To them, I was the black sheep, the dropout, the embarrassment. I closed the laptop, hands shaking. For the first time in years, I felt something stronger than sadness: clarity. They weren't just blind to my efforts, they were comfortable using me as a cautionary tale. I went for a walk to clear my head. The humidity wrapped around me like punishment, and the cicadas droned on as if nothing in the world had changed. But everything had. In the window of a boutique, I saw a mannequin wearing one of our partner brands. The Red Trails logo tagged neatly at the corner of the display. My chest tightened. The world believed in what I was building. Only my family refused to. Back in the apartment, I opened my journal, the one I'd stopped writing in after college. I wrote one sentence. They took my trust. I'll take back my story. That night, I didn't code. I didn't call Marcus. I sat in the dark, scrolling through Brian's Instagram feed, watching the fake smiles, the dinners, the captions about hard work paying off. Each photo was a brick in the wall that separated me from the people who should have had my back. And then I saw it, a selfie of Mom, standing in front of the store with a caption that read, "Sometimes letting go is love." That was it. The line between family and fraud vanished. My phone buzzed again, Marcus checking in. "You good?" I stared at the screen, then typed back, "No, but I'm about to be." For the first time, I felt no guilt for what I was about to do. No hesitation, just a slow, simmering rage that steadied my hands instead of shaking them. They used my silence to write their version. It's time I told mine. The anger burned fast, but the silence that followed burned deeper. For days, I couldn't work. I'd sit at my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard, the cursor blinking like it was mocking me. Every sound in that tiny apartment seemed too loud. The dripping faucet, the delivery trucks outside, the creak of the ceiling fan. My world had gone from motion to pause. I kept replaying their voices in my head. Dad's, "You're wasting your life." Mom's, "We did what's best for you." Brian's laughter echoing in the doorway. I told myself I was angry, but really, I was tired. Tired of fighting to be seen. Tired of trying to love people who measured worth by paycheck and pride. That night, I found myself scrolling through old photos. Christmases at the store, Dad dressing up as Santa for neighborhood kids, Mom laughing while hanging tinsel in the window. For a second, it all looked perfect, before I remembered how easily they'd turned that love into judgment. The next morning, I opened my phone to a voicemail from Mom. Her voice sounded soft, almost tender. "Emma, I hope you're okay. You need to understand we only did this because we care. Sometimes you have to let people hit bottom before they find their way back." I deleted it halfway through. If hitting bottom meant watching the people you love rewrite your life for their comfort, then yeah, I'd hit it. The day drifted by in fragments. A knock on the door, the mail carrier handing me a small package, an old hard drive I'd left at home. Inside was a sticky note in Mom's handwriting. "You forgot this. Take care." I stared at it for a long time. Take care. That's all I was now. A loose end to tie up. At sunset, I walked down to the pier by the harbor. The tide was low, the air thick with salt. Couples strolled by, laughing, holding hands. I leaned against the railing and watched the sky fade from orange to bruised purple. I thought about calling Dad, about trying one more time to make him understand that what I was building wasn't rebellion, it was evolution. But I already knew how that conversation would go. He'd tell me about responsibility,
I'd tell him about innovation. We'd both hang up feeling righteous and hollow. So I stayed quiet. The waves lapped against the wooden posts below, slow and steady. I felt small again, like the girl who once begged her parents to believe in her science fair project, or the teenager who waited up at night hoping her brother would stop teasing and just listen. Tears came then, sudden and hot, surprising me with their force. Not because of the stolen money or the lies, but because I realized something much heavier. They hadn't just stopped believing in me. They'd never believed in me to begin with. When the sobs finally stopped, I felt empty, but lighter. There was a strange peace in admitting defeat, like setting down a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying. I sat there until the lights along the harbor flickered on. Somewhere behind me, a jazz band played in a restaurant, the trumpets soft and melancholy. I whispered into the night, I'm done proving myself to people who've already decided I'm a disappointment. The wind carried the words away, scattering them across the water like a confession. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment something in me shifted. Despair wasn't the end. It was the reset. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds and landed on my laptop screen. Dust floated in the air, tiny motes turning in the light. For the first time in days, I didn't feel hollow. I felt clear. Pain has a strange way of sharpening you. The moment you stop expecting apologies, you start seeing opportunities. I made a pot of cheap coffee, sat at my desk, and opened a folder I hadn't touched in months. Plan B. Inside were business notes, mock contracts, and an idea Marcus and I had shelved long ago, a retail tech partnership model for physical stores. It could have saved Dad's business if he'd ever let me try. But this time, it wasn't about saving him. It was about control. That afternoon, I called Marcus. Hey, he said, surprised. You sound different. I am, I told him. How fast can we scale Thread Trail's enterprise version? He hesitated, then chuckled. You've got that revenge in your voice tone again. Not revenge, I said. Correction. The plan formed faster than I expected. Within a week, I scheduled a meeting with Clara Jensen, a corporate attorney I'd met at a startup mixer years ago. She was sharp, unflappable, and, most importantly, silent when needed. We met at a coffee shop near the harbor. She wore a navy blazer and an expression that said she'd seen worse. So, she said, stirring her espresso, tell me what you want. I want to buy my family's company, without them knowing it's me. Her brow arched slightly, but she didn't flinch. Walk me through it. I explained how the Carter & Sons stores were drowning in debt, how I suspected Dad had taken out high-interest loans against inventory, and how the bank was quietly preparing to sell off the debt at a discount. I need a holding company, I said, something anonymous, clean on paper. Clara's pen tapped once on her notebook. A shell acquisition, then. You'll own the paper they're indebted to, not the store itself. When the bank sells the loan, you'll effectively become their creditor. Exactly. She nodded slowly. That's bold. I'm done being quiet. By the following week, Harbor Light Holdings LLC was born, registered under a neutral trust with Clara's firm as the legal buffer. Every document looked like routine business, every move invisible. Meanwhile, the outside world was finally catching up to me. A journalist from the Charleston Business Review had reached out asking to feature Thread Trail in their upcoming Innovators of the South issue. The timing couldn't have been better. When the interviewer asked what inspired me, I smiled. Failure and being underestimated. The piece went live the next Monday. The headline read, From small-town dropout to tech visionary, the woman changing retail from her living room. My inbox flooded with congratulations from investors, boutique owners, and even a few people I hadn't spoken to since high school, but not from my family. That was fine. I wasn't writing this chapter for them to read. I was writing it so I could finally turn the page. As the weeks passed, Claire kept me updated. The bank was eager to sell off the Carter & Sons debt portfolio, she said over the phone one afternoon. They'll accept 40 cents on the dollar. It's practically a clearance sale. I laughed softly. Perfect. My family loves sales. When the deal closed, I stared at the final document for a long time. On paper, Harbor Light Holdings now owned everything my father had spent 40 years building and everything he'd used to dismiss me. There was a strange peace in that. Not satisfaction, not victory, just symmetry. That night, I walked down to the harbor again. The air was cooler, the waves calmer. I leaned on the railing and whispered to the water. They took my name off their story. I just wrote myself back in. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry. I felt alive.
The day the article went viral, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. LinkedIn notifications, Twitter mentions, journalists tagging ThreadTrail as one of 2025's fastest-growing fashion tech startups. And then the message I'd been waiting for popped up on my screen. Dad, saw your interview. So this app thing is real, huh? I stared at it for a long time before replying. Me. Always was. He didn't answer. 2 days later, another message, this time from Mom. Your father's worried about the store. Sales are bad. We may lose the building. I typed 3 words. I hope not. Meanwhile, Clara called with the final update. The bank accepted Harbor Light's purchase offer, she said. You officially hold the Carter & Sons loan portfolio. Congratulations, creditor. I smiled. Let's make it interesting. 2 weeks later, I sent out invitations. Cream-colored envelopes embossed with gold lettering. You're cordially invited to an exclusive celebration hosted by Harbor Light Ventures. Location, the Magnolia Wharf Hotel, Charleston's premier waterfront venue. No details, no explanation, just the kind of mystery that made people curious. The night of the event, the ballroom shimmered with candlelight and quiet jazz. Investors, reporters, local business owners, all gathered, glasses of champagne in hand. I wore a deep green gown and a calm I'd earned the hard way. When my family walked in, I saw the confusion flicker across their faces. Dad's tie was too tight, Mom's smile too brittle, and Brian was already looking for someone to impress. They didn't know the debt that was strangling their business now belonged entirely to me. Marcus approached with a grin. You ready? Born ready, I said. When the lights dimmed, I stepped up to the microphone. Good evening, I began, my voice steady. Tonight isn't about celebration. It's about transformation, about what happens when the people who were told to stay small decide to grow anyway. A ripple of applause. I nodded toward the projection screen behind me. A slideshow began. Images of our app, our team, boutique owners who'd partnered with ThreadTrail. And then, in bold letters, the next slide appeared. Harbor Light Holdings, proud new owner of Carter & Sons Outfitters. The room went silent. Dad's face turned the color of paper. Mom's hand froze around her wine glass. Brian's smirk evaporated. I looked directly at them. A few months ago, my family told me to fend for myself, so I did. And in doing so, I bought the debt they owed. A murmur ran through the guests. Cameras clicked. Dad rose halfway from his chair, voice trembling. What have you done? I kept my tone even. I kept your legacy alive, Dad. You were going to lose everything. Now at least it's in hands that care. He blinked,
not understanding whether it was a mercy or a punishment. I continued, turning to the crowd. Sometimes the only way to save what's broken is to take it apart first. The next slide appeared. Proof of debt transfers, signed bank statements. Clara stood quietly at the side, arms folded, every detail airtight. And then came the moment I'd both dreaded and awaited. I clicked the final slide. A screenshot of my mother's Facebook post, the one where she'd called me a failure. Next to it, a screenshot of the bank account withdrawal under her signature. I didn't have to say a word. The room said it for me. Gasps, murmurs, a single whispered, "Oh my God." Mom's eyes filled with tears. Emma, I cut her off gently. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for accountability. Brian stood, his voice small now. You're ruining us. I met his gaze. No, you did that when you sold the truth for likes. Silence. Only the clinking of a distant glass. Then I took a breath and softened my tone. Family should build each other up. When they don't, the world will still give you the bricks to build yourself. Applause erupted, not loud and wild, but slow and steady, the kind that feels earned. My father sat down, head in his hands. Mom stared at the tablecloth. Brian disappeared somewhere near the exit. I didn't feel joy. I felt release. After the speeches ended, guests mingled, praising the story of resilience. They didn't realize they just witnessed a quiet execution, the moment one empire ended and another began. Marcus found me by the balcony. You good? I nodded. Better than I thought I'd be. He raised his glass. To justice, then. I smiled faintly. To peace. Outside, the harbor shimmered under the city lights. As I looked out across the water, I thought about the years I'd spent trying to make them proud. How much of my life had been lived waiting for approval that never came. Now I didn't need it. They had their truth, I had mine. And standing there, wind tangling through my hair, I realized something no one had ever taught me. Winning isn't about revenge. It's about walking away whole, while the people who broke you are still figuring out how to stand.
It's been 6 months since that night at Magnolia Wharf. The whispers faded, the headlines cooled, and Charleston moved on, like it always does. But I haven't forgotten a single moment. After the gala, there were no confrontations, no angry phone calls, no apologies. Just silence, the kind that feels heavier than words. Dad signed the restructuring papers Clara drafted, officially transferring day-to-day operations of Carter & Sons to Harborlight. Mom mailed me a short note that read, "I hope you're happy." I didn't reply. The irony is, I wasn't happy. Not yet. Justice doesn't bring joy. It brings balance. And balance can feel quiet, almost lonely. In the months that followed, I poured myself into rebuilding the stores. We rebranded them as Carter Collective, a hybrid of digital and local fashion, a place where technology and tradition could finally coexist. I kept Dad on as a consultant, partly out of kindness, partly out of nostalgia. He never said thank you, but sometimes, when he'd walk through the new showroom, I'd see something soften in his eyes. Mom stopped attending church for a while. People talked, of course. Charleston never runs out of gossip. But I think she needed time to face herself without an audience. Brian's Instagram went dark. His Mustang was repossessed. Last I heard, he was working at a car rental counter out near the airport. Maybe he's learning humility the way I had to learn resilience, through silence and consequence. One evening, I met Marcus for dinner. He raised a glass and said, "So, you won." I laughed. Did I?
He smiled. You built an empire from ashes, Emma. That's a win in my book. But as I walked home later, I realized what I'd truly built wasn't an empire. It was distance. The kind that keeps you safe, but lonely. Still, I don't regret it. Some distances are sacred. Sometimes, late at night, I scroll through ThreadTrail's analytics dashboard. Tens of thousands of active users, partnerships with national chains, positive press. It feels surreal knowing this started in a garage with borrowed laptops and stubborn hope. I still visit the harbor from time to time, the same spot where I once cried, convinced I was completely alone. Now I stand there in silence, watching the tide shift under the pier. The city lights reflect across the water like tiny versions of myself, each one carrying a story, a scar, a victory. I think about the people watching this video, maybe sitting in their own quiet apartment somewhere, wondering if they'll ever prove the world wrong. And I want to tell them this. You don't need to prove anything to people who can't see your worth. Build it anyway. Build it quietly. Build it until silence can't hide it. Because one day, the people who doubted you will run out of things to say, and by then, you won't need their words. You'll have your own. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, if you've ever had to fight for your dream while pretending not to care, drop a comment below. Your story matters. Your courage matters. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Not for me, for the next person who needs to hear that walking away isn't failure. Walking away can be the first real step home.